Hello and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering EDH deck tech idea. Today we are taking a look at Indominus Rex Alpha. It is a 5 mana 6/6 legendary creature dinosaur mutant, and as it enters the battlefield, discard any number of creature cards. It enters with a flying counter on it if a card discarded this way has flying. The same is true for First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Hexproof, Haste, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Trample and Vigilance. It also has a triggered ability. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each counter on it. First of all, let's talk about how this works. As soon as you cast a spell and as soon as it resolves, there's nothing new from stopping the first line of text. It is no triggered or activated ability or cast trigger whatsoever, it simply just happens. The only thing that your opponents can react to is its ETB trigger. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each counter on it. I have built this deck to be a keyword soup deck, which means that we want to suit up Indominus Rex with a bunch of keywords and swing for the win. Aside from that, we are in Sultai colors, so we want to control the board as much as possible to easily stay on top of the food chain and kick our opponents out one by one with commander damage. There are a bunch of creature cards that have a few keywords on them, so I will feature a few, but in my deck list you will find even more. We play Venomthrope, a 3 mana 2/2, and it has Flying, Death Touch and Hexproof. Hexproof is a very important keyword for this creature, so yes, you can play this one in the early game to have a useful blocker, but most likely you want to keep it in hand simply to suit up the Indominus. You play Balustrade Worm, a 5 mana 5/5, this spell can't be countered, it has Trample and Haste, and if Delirium is enabled you can pay 4 mana and return it from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter. This is a very synergistic creature simply because you can discard it to the Indominus Rex ability and after that bring it back from your graveyard to clap even harder. The biggest creature of keyword soup is Sire of 7 Deaths, a 7 mana 7/7 with First Strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Lifelink and Ward, pay 7 life. Sadly, the Indominus doesn't copy the Ward ability, but all of the other keywords are good enough. We play Quilt Great Worm, a 6 mana 7/7 with Trample, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage during your turn, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Furthermore, you may cast this card from your graveyard by removing 6 counters from among creatures you control in addition to paying its other costs. This deck usually has a big problem with finishing your opponents off fast enough, as I personally haven't found a creature that can give the Indominus Double Strike, so we need to grow it in different ways, for example by giving it +1/+1 counters. The Quilt Great Worm is a card that we can discard to its enter ability and then also recast from our graveyard when we need it. We play Nightveil Predator, a 4 mana 3/3 with Flying, Death Touch and Hexproof. We also play Crackplate Baloth, a 7 mana 6/6 with Kicker for 3 mana. This spell can't be countered, it has Hexproof and Haste, and if it was kicked it enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Not only do we draw a bunch of cards with Indominus Rex enter the battlefield trigger, we also got a few other cards that are extremely helpful. Due to the fact that we will suit it up with Hexproof, Flying, Haste and so on, Hunter's Insight is a great card. A 3 mana instant, choose target creature you control. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker this turn, draw that many cards. We will probably already draw a bunch of cards by its enter the battlefield trigger, and if we then can connect with Hunter's Insight on it, we will have a stacked hand again. We are in blue, so we also play Mystic Remora, a great 1-drop in this deck, a 1 mana enchantment with cumulative upkeep 1, and whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell you may draw a card unless that player pays 4 mana. We play Sylvan Library, a 2 mana enchantment, and at the beginning of your draw step you may draw 2 additional cards. If you do, choose 2 cards in your hand drawn this turn. For each of those cards pay 4 life or put the card on top of your library. We got no problem with paying a bunch of life into Sylvan Library to get our hand stacked up to cast our Indominus Rex, because we might find a few creatures with lifelink so we can stabilize again. We play Growth Spiral, a 2 mana instant, draw a card, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. In this video I'm not featuring the usual RAM package that I like to put into decks, but Growth Spiral does it all. We draw a card and we can also play another land this turn. We play Rishkar's Expertise, a 6 mana sorcery, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. You may cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. While we hold up Counterspell mana but do not recognize any other threat, we can also fire off Return of the Wildspeaker, a 5 mana instant, choose 1. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures creatures you control, or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. As I have said earlier, we want to stay on top of the food chain and dominate this place, so we also play a bunch of removal. We play Sheoldred's Edict, a 2-mana instant, choose one. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature, a creature token, or also a planeswalker. We play Liliana's Triumph, a 2-mana instant, each opponent sacrifices a creature, and if you control a Liliana planeswalker, each opponent also discards a card. Let's take out the competition. We play Soul Shatter, a 3-mana instant, each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost among creatures and planeswalkers they control. We play some of the best single target removal spells in our colors. We play Rapid Hybridization, a 1-mana instant, destroy target creature, it can't be regenerated, and that creature's controller creates a free green frog lizard creature token. Just as Pongify, a 1-mana instant, destroy target creature, it can't be regenerated, and its controller creates a free green ape creature token. If we need to exile something, we can also kicker Tear Asunder, a 2-mana instant, and for 2 additional mana we can kicker it, exile target artifact or enchantment. If this spell was kicked, exile target non-land permanent instead. As I have said earlier, we want to chip our opponents down one by one with commander damage, so we also need to control the stack, which is why we play a bunch of counterspells. We play Swansong, a 1-mana instant, counter target enchantment, instant or sorcery spell, and its controller creates a 2/2 bluebird creature token with flying. Arcane Denial, a 2-mana instant, counter target spell, its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and you draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. The original counterspell, a 2-mana instant, counter target spell, an offer you can't refuse, a 1-mana instant, counter target non-creature spell, its controller creates 2 treasure tokens, we negate all of those incoming board wipes, a 2-mana instant, counter target non-creature spell, and last but not least, Miscast, a 1-mana instant, counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 3 mana. You want to win more? You get it. As I have said earlier, when the Indominus Rex enters, you just discard any number of creature cards, so it also works with flickering this creature, which can help us to refill our hand with more gas and interaction, which is why we play Essence Flux, a 1-mana instant, exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If it's a spirit, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This is also why we play Planar Incision, a 2-mana instant, exile target artifact or creature, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. This is great as we will pump up the Indominus Rex to a 7-power creature, which means by commander damage rules it will be a 3-turn clock for one of our opponents. We play Teferi's Time Twist if we do not have any answer for the incoming board wipe, a 2-mana instant, exile target permanent you control. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step, and if it enters the battlefield as a creature, it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter. Another great setup card is Roaring Earth, a 2-mana enchantment. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or vehicle you control. You can also channel this card for 2 mana and X, and discarding it, put X +1/+1 counters on target land you control. It becomes a 0/0 green spirit creature token with haste, and it's still a land. We want to play this card in the early game simply to be able to keep pumping up the Indominus Rex while increasing our mana base. We play Power Fist, a 2-mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature has trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it, and you can equip it for 2 mana. We gotta play this card because, as I have said earlier, the faster we can kick our opponents out one by one, the higher the chances that we still got enough interaction for all of the remaining players. And last but not least, we play Agatha's Soul Cauldron, a 2-mana legendary artifact, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. You can also tap it and exile target card from a graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. You gotta keep in mind that you will face a bunch of different decks out there, so Agatha's Soul Cauldron counters all of those reanimator strategies, and furthermore, if you can give your Indominus Rex Vigilance, you can keep pumping him up by negating all of your opponent's graveyard strategies, by exiling all of their creatures, and if it happens that you find a few creatures with great activated abilities, you might still use them with the Indominus Rex. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I would play in Indominus Rex Alpha. Let me know which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next. Make sure to check out my deck list in the notes below, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.